Attention, please. Eastern Airlines Flight 19, now ready for departure.
Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Express monorail. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're entering the vacation kingdom of the world.
There's enough land here to hold all the ideas and plans we could possibly imagine. We call it Epcot. Will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, taking you back to the vacation kingdom of the world, the way it was, and the way it is in your memories.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast. This episode is number 46, Snow White's Scary Adventure. We'll be taking you back to that dark ride that was nestled into Fantasyland up until 2012. I'm your host, Todd McCartney, and sitting in with me as always tonight is Mr. Hal Bowers, who is the writer, producer, director, all the above of this month's episode.
I have staged 50 musical comedies, and I'll stage 50 more.
Look at that.
Nice to be here tonight.
And coming in from Ohio, Mr. JT Cougar. How you doing tonight, JT?
Doing good in the Rubber City. We're 20 degrees-ish, holding firm there. Heating bills are rising, but we're doing good.
Excellent. You attempted to get into the, whatever it is, the Enormo Dome or wherever the blimp lives with your donation, and you aborted that mission to see the Goodyear blimp up close.
There's the original air dock where they built them in World War II, and then in... I forget the city now, but there's the current place where they store the blimp. They have a promotion with Toys for Tots, which I always tell people, hey, Disney connection there with the logo and that whole thing. That's right. You would go take your car, you donate the toy, and you get to drive through the hangar, and Santa's sitting there by the blimp. It's all inflated. After 1.5 hours in dead stop, slow-moving traffic, we pulled the plug and left. My daughter had to use the bathroom. It was just a nightmare, so we didn't make it this year, and I still have the toy in my house that we were going to donate. So
next year, hook the whole entire family up with the Stadium Pal self-contained bathroom unit, and you just, pack some hamburgers and picnics, and you'll be all set.
It was so sad. All my daughter wanted to do was go bowling, and it was our first night away from the baby. As bad as that sounds, but we wanted one of those, the original family, and that's right. We sat in this traffic for 2 hours. She goes, "Are we going bowling still?" I guess. So that was one of our winter adventures. But yes, we're holding strong here in Ohio through the blizzards and the storms. Nice. So
yeah, we did a little tubing here. So
I saw that.
Yeah, we had a good time. So. Well, Brian, we got to talk about your winter activities. Coming in all the way from the city of brotherly love, a season ticket holder to the, is it the Phantoms, I believe?
The Lehigh Valley Phantoms.
The Lehigh Valley Phantoms is Mr. Brian P. Miles tonight.
Greetings, salutations, and Happy New Year from Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love.
That's right. This is our first episode in 2019 officially. So
yes, since we counted it down.
Yeah.
Brian, I thought of you the other day. They had a Rocky marathon on. I watched parts 1 and 5, and it's a horrible change of pace, 1 to 5.
It's 5 is probably the weakest of the bunch, but they make up for it with 6, which is, I think, Rocky Balboa, which was a really strong return after 20 years or whatever it was.
Yes. And I did hear a Philadelphia reference because their football's still going on, right? That's still happening.
Football no, that ended the other day. But yes.
Oh, okay. Well, they said they were going to grease the poles in Philadelphia with Geno's steak grease. Is that what it so the fans don't climb the poles?
Things. Yeah, that's...
Geno's hamburgers too. Oh, haven't had one of those.
I had to laugh.
Hamburgers are long gone.
Long time. Well, they're back, but
they came back and then they failed again. But I did have a little jaunt up a whirlwind since you mentioned my hockey team. We followed them on a 3-day road trip through New England. So just to tell you where we touched upon, we flew up to Boston and drove to Providence, where we saw them play the Providence Bruins. And then after a swing through Newport the next morning and toured the Breakers, we went to Hartford, Connecticut to see them play the Hartford Wolfpack in the old...
Is that at the old...
It is at the
Whalers.
old Civic Arena where the Whalers played. and it looks like an arena out of the 1970s. And then the last day, Sunday afternoon, we stopped and saw them play an afternoon game in Springfield, Massachusetts, the Springfield Thunderbirds, which is only about 30 minutes north of Hartford. I will say the fans in Providence were the nicest. Because we were wearing our Phantoms garb. The fans in Hartford were the next nicest and fairly nice. And the fans in Springfield were kind of not nice. To the point where there were two great interactions. One was a guy, as we're walking the concourse between periods, says, "Why don't you go back to Philadelphia?" And I laughed at him and said, "They don't play in Philadelphia. They play in Allentown." At which point he started laughing at himself. And then the other was a collection of kids who were shouting profanities at us as we walked around. And I kind of wished I had Principal Kujar there to bring some order to the situation.
Right.
You don't know what to do when there's like a 10-year-old cursing at you, because my instinct is to curse back. I am
and then you want to be the adult.
Right.
Well, I'm not that wedded to being an adult. There might have been some words exchanged, but I feel like I got the better of them.
Good thing you didn't go to a game in Jersey. Boy, oh boy.
Oh boy, it would have been, yeah. So, we have JT sitting out in the cold with the Toys for Tots. Brian, you did your New England hockey tour. I went tubing all winter. How? Anything winter-wise? Did you just come out of the house?
Went to the
beach. Go to the beach. Seashells.
Trying to think.
He put on a long sleeve T-shirt to commemorate the.
It's a little chilly. Nothing. Okay.
No, we didn't do anything. We just.
Well, you come visit one of us. We'll get all of you into some winter events. So.
Yeah. Sorry that just turned so uninteresting.
I feel like, having lived up north, if I lived in Florida, I would feel obligated like once a week during the winter just to go out and like take pictures of myself on the beach or eat like a soft serve cone in a short sleeve shirt. Like, hey, everybody up there, how you doing?
Yeah.
It's just business as usual for him. That's the thing. Like it's like in summer we get excited, we do all these things. Winter we don't, but we still do winter things. Hal's just living the norm. He
just does summer things year round.
Yeah,
it's just norm.
I'm like, I want to say I did send out a picture because we were at an outdoor restaurant with.
I recall that picture
on Christmas, and the kids were just playing.
We got the mail.
Yeah, fortunately we had a very temperate Christmas week. So
good.
So it was nice.
All the Bowers children seemed pleased with their gifts.
Yes, they were.
Well, to all of our listeners,
wait. We can't move on without mentioning Lily's hot dog maker.
She got the hot dog maker. Santa brought that. Yeah, and we had hot dogs for breakfast on Christmas morning.
Look at that.
It's basically a everybody asked it. They assumed it was the gas station roller style. Like, and I'm not putting that in my kitchen. It was basically.
Did you get the steamer one?
No, it's basically it's a toaster. Right? Yeah, with two slots for two round holes for the hot dogs and then two oval shaped holes for the buns. And you drop it in and it toasts them, and that's it. It comes up, and you have two hot dogs and toasted buns instantly.
JT, just wait until she learns how to cook sauerkraut. You are going to have a feast every week.
But, so we don't get too deep into the weeds, I got to say, I much prefer a steamed hot dog bun to a toasted one.
Oh man, that's I could go both ways.
I mean,
if you're grilling outside, you gotta put the buns on the grill.
Yeah, it's whatever. It's a hot dog on Christmas morning. It was.
Hey, it was a little celebratory colors though, with the green relish and the red ketchup, right?
Yes.
So, oh man. Alrighty, well, thanks to... well, I hope all of our listeners had a great holiday season and having a wonderful new year here in 2019. So we're going to move right into some of our corrections and comments. Do you guys remember Paul Zimmerman from last month? He was our big prize pot winner.
Oh, he was. So, Paul. Yeah, hey, Paul. Yeah.
So Paul wrote in, and he was excited, and he knows all the stuff is on the way to him. And the reason that he wrote into us was that he heard us talk about Birnbaum's guide, which I've referenced a number of times, and we said, hey, it's a lot of great stuff in there if you pick it up. And he just did that. He went and bought a couple of them. He says he's got 84, 91, 95, 03, and 10. and the newest one. So he's got some comparison work to do. But he says, I've never seen so much in-depth information on everything Disney. It's awesome to see the descriptions of rides, restaurants, hotels, even the current going rates for them, and theme park tickets in each edition. So there you go. Take it from the horse's mouth right there. There's a satisfied customer out there who went out and found some old Birnbaum books. 86 is my personal favorite edition that I had, because that's the one that I think the cover is barely hanging on. I read that thing over and over many times, and that's the one I still reference to this day. So
I'm
thanks for
surprised
writing in,
how pricey they go for being. I don't know. I figured it'd be like $0.25, $1. Like they're I mean, they're useless, but they're not. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're not. But yeah, they still hold some value.
They certainly do. So check them out if you can find some. We have another write in here. This is Mike had some comments for you, Hal, actually, on Pleasure Island. We mentioned Pleasure Island. So he says Reedy Creek does connect to the Kissimmee River down at Lake Cypress. So Mr. Pleasure would have had a rough time navigating parts of it north to Lake Russell.
It's never not funny.
That's right. So, and he also did mention too, as far as Pleasure Island was as a nighttime destination, it was also, I don't know if we mentioned this, countering Church Street Station, right, in downtown Orlando.
Yes, that was, I can't remember, I read the letter and I couldn't remember how much detail we went into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was definitely, that it was Disney reaction to like, holy crap, they're making a lot of money down there. We need to make a lot of money.
Yeah, Bob Snow was the developer and really got the nighttime entertainment marketing going down there. And they said that there were endless lines of buses that brought visitors from hotels, and Disney being Disney basically saw the revenue leaving their property and wanted to capitalize on that. So it was pretty neat. And I guess he sold that was out to Baltimore Gas in 1989. Did that have anything to do with the power station that was in Baltimore as an attraction?
I don't. You know what? I'm not sure, because
you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. I was actually doing some research on this. I don't know if it was part of the show otherwise, but I didn't realize the Baltimore Gas connection. I know he had sold out half of his shares for starters, and then he ended up selling the other half and divesting himself completely, like right before everything started to tank. So he did very well for himself. Oh, but then I think he actually took that money and tried to roll it into like another development in Vegas.
Las Vegas, wasn't it? Yeah. It was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which didn't go over. And he had actually done this once before in someplace in North Florida. There's still a Rosie O'Grady's in like Pensacola or someplace. And he started that up, fixed up an old place, and then took the money from that and started up Orlando, and then took all that money that he was supposed to go out and do the Vegas thing.
Right.
I think the Vegas thing didn't happen.
I feel a sense of accomplishment when I get a storm door hung, and this guy's out here building this stuff all over the place.
Oh, man. I just did look up the power plant in Baltimore. That was actually Six Flags, so...
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's not our something we would take on, but that has an interesting story to it. And Walt Disney Imagineer Gary Goddard, actually, with his company Landmark Entertainment, led the project on that. So if you want some interesting read up on that, that's a failed attraction that only lasted about 5 years in Baltimore's Inner Harbor.
Lots of famous Disney Imagineers. Mark Davis did stuff, and there's a ton of
the Dark Side of Disney guy, Leonard Kinsey, grew up around there, so he has at times gone on like tweet storms about the power plant and how cool it was, and it formed part of his love for theme parks, and so I'm always interested when he or someone else on Twitter engages people who had anything to do with it, and I'm just like, boy, it sounds like it would have been a neat place to go.
Yeah. I remember seeing it. I was in Baltimore in 1985 or summer 86, somewhere in there, and I remember seeing it. We did not go in, but it did look really cool, very steampunk-like a little bit, and it's kind of a retro. Kind of reminds me a little bit of what the Edison is now, too. So, But excellent. Well, thank you, Mike, for writing in for that. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to JT for the listener mailbag.
Sounds good. Well, pretty good mailbag this month. First one I have here is from Megan. She says, "Hi guys, every time I ride the PeopleMover, there's a section that I can't figure out. When you're in the tunnel, just passing the Buzz Lightyear ride, on the left-hand side it looks as if at one point it was a window overlooking something. I can't figure out what it is or what it once was, if anything. Do you guys know anything about that? Thank you."
So in the olden days, when that attraction was if you had wings, there were 3 windows that would look down into the attraction. So the first one on your right would look down over the Caribbean section. The second window, which I think is open today, you can see part of Buzz Lightyear, was the Mexico area. And then the third one, which is the window on the left-hand side, looked down and you could see like New Orleans and the street there. When it became Take Flight, they put a huge backlit Duratrans on the first window, so you couldn't look down into there at all. And then the second window, you could look down and see the barnyard, not the barnyard, but like the barnstorming area. Mm-hmm. And then that third window, you could kind of look down and see like Paris and the a little bit of the area where it transitions with the jet engine. And then once it became Buzz Lightyear, they covered up that window because there's really nothing special to look at in that one spot.
How I knew you would come to the rescue on this one. I was not doubting you in any way on this. Just so you know.
All right. Well, thank you, Megan. Appreciate that. So next up, we have a tweet, and super interesting. It's from Birnbaum, and it's entitled, it's a little blurb called Plant Sitting. And I'll just kind of read it word for word. "Plants do not fare well in the heat of a closed-up car for a day. Those who have purchased greenery at Disney Village Marketplace or brought a favorite fern from home will be grateful to know that their horticulture wonders can be accommodated at the kennels at Fort Wilderness, Epcot Center, the TTC, or the Disney MGM Studios theme park. There's no charge."
Just the thought that you bought greenery and you have it and you somehow decide to go to Epcot after purchasing the greenery or the studios.
Or anywhere.
Anywhere. I mean, all these places where you could drop off your fern.
These are my ferns. I put googly eyes on them also. Most people don't put googly eyes on their ferns. I do. I got the idea off my cactuses because I like to feel comfortable around all my plants.
It's quite a service that I actually want to inquire about it now. Can we
put a feeler out?
Yeah, can you buy flowers, or what about the bonsai trees? If we bought a bonsai tree.
That's more the Japanese place, right?
That's okay. I'm just saying it's greenery, right? And then we'll take it over the Magic Kingdom, and we'll see if they'll plant sit it for us. Or take it actually, better yet, we'll take it over to Best Friends Pets Resort and see if they will
take this blurb with you.
Yeah, just say it's available. So, also a shout out to the Twitter name there, XS Technician Lauren. So I'm curious to know how XS Tech is going these days. They've since departed from the Magic Kingdom.
She's at Ink and Paint Department.
Yeah.
Oh, that's our friend. That's our friend Lauren. She lives over in New Jersey. Big fan of the podcast.
You said New Jersey?
Loyal. It is New Jersey. She's from New Jersey.
Then we must mention pork roll.
We must. In fact, we had lunch. She was part of a group that had lunch last year. I think last summer we all had lunch, and I don't think anybody ordered pork roll at the table though.
Oh, okay.
Now, what's interesting about this is the brought from home, because if you live where Hal lives, roughly 2 hours away, I feel like you can spend the day without your fern because you could be back that night. But if you're driving some distance, I still find it amazing you need to bring your fern with you. Like I just don't.
At JT, my family always travels with their favorite, cacti and nightshade plants. So
when you're in the Gold Key plan, they will replant it for you in your room in the floor.
This is again where the Japanese they show their superior planning because they developed a bonsai tree so that it takes up less space in your luggage or your travel plan.
There we go.
So you still get the greenery, but you don't have to.
I would like a video walk up to each location listed and see just the cast member's face on video. Hey, I got a plant here. Would you mind watching this? Birnbaum said you would do it. Just like those places are gonna just look at you like, what is wrong with you?
Well, we'll add that to our list of things to do as well. The postcard race. So
yes, I love the postcard race.
Thanks for writing in, Lauren.
All right. Well, next one. I got a long one here. This is from Dave. Kind of go through here, paraphrase. He says, hello everyone at Retro WDW. I have only just discovered your website and podcast. I've got a lot of catching up to do. You sure do, Dave. Where have you been? Welcome to the party. I'm hoping you can help me. I'm looking for anything to do with the contemporary resort arcade of the early 80s. It may have been called the Fiesta Fun Center and later called the Food and Fun Center. It was in the vast and magical arcade, probably 1981, that I saw a Pac-Man machine in person for the first time. And there were rows, I assume rows of Pac-Man machines. He goes on to talk about some more games, but I had the sense that every arcade game ever invented was there, and not just one of each, but 3 and 4s of each. To the 11 and 12-year-old pinball and arcade game obsessed kid, it was an absolute dream. Okay, so now I'm trying to better piece together that room. Does anyone remember anything about it? Specific game titles, what the carpet looked like? I think Hal might know about that. How high the ceilings were, if there was music in the room, was it quarters or tokens, anything. Me and my kid brother, who remembers even less, would be super grateful. So the Fiesta Fun Center, we'll give it the short version right now, right?
Well, it was one of the most amazing arcades ever. I have to agree 100%. And it deserves its own episode. So I think we would be better to not go into a lot of detail and say that we will cover Fiesta Fun Center in great detail, because it had, besides like fantastic games, it had a tiny like 1-lane bowling alley and a
movie theater,
a movie theater and a shooting gallery and all kinds of incredible stuff. So
now, can I ask, when I saw it in the mid-90s, was it a shell of its former self, or was it still? I mean, I remember being very blown away. But like, do you guys think it was like down a peg or something, or was it still pretty cool then?
No, I think it was probably pretty good.
Okay.
I mean,
I was curious.
I don't remember it changing an awful lot.
Yeah,
and they brought in the latest games. I mean, that's the thing. So, I mean, I remember very distinctly skipping school, college, one day and going up to the Contemporary with some schoolmates, and it was amazing because they still had all the games. So this would have been like 87 or 88, and they still had tons of games from the late 70s and early 80s. Stuff that I hadn't seen in forever, like Tail Gunner and all kinds of like vector games and things, and crap loads of them. Like you said, it was just like row after row after row. If you reproduced that arcade today, people would flip out.
It would be in the size of the wave, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good size space.
For sure. Well, Dave, stay tuned. We'll let you get caught up in the meantime, and then we will have at least full or half episode on the Fiesta Fun Center. I'm sure a big chunk. So thanks, Dave, and enjoy your listening. Alrighty, next up, hi Retro WDW crew, and now the LBVHS crew. Just wanted to send my congrats to you all. Lots of hard work is paying off, and I believe you're on the best path to historically preserving as much of WDW's history as possible, even the stuff Disney wants us all to forget. I've been listening to Retro WDW since the first episode was present at Epcot 35 event. Has many of our t-shirts and continues to plan to support your efforts any way they can. Please keep doing what you're doing. It's great. I'm sorry, I don't have a name on here. GWS the Second. That's what I have. Do anybody know who that is?
George Washington Smith.
All right. So he went on to tell us how cool we are and amazing, and he was very kind.
My
so
favorite
thank you.
kind of letters.
Yeah, GWS. We will keep up the efforts, and thank you for your support since the start. So it's definitely happening because of you. Well, thank you for those kind words, GWS the Second. We will keep on keeping on. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you want to touch base and ask us something, podcast at RetroWDW.com. That's where you can reach us. We also check tweets, Instagrams, Facebook messages. We're all over the place, so make sure you like us on those as well.
All right, well, it's time to get to this month's Audio Rewind. And last month, I guess if you were on our Lake and Lagoon tour, you kind of got a hint at this one, and I may have made it a little too difficult because we didn't have a lot of people write in. So let's take a listen to last month's Audio Rewind. All right, guys. What was it? Who got it?
Clearly Pablo Cruz.
Yeah, absolutely. It was Pablo Cruz. The song was Worlds Away, and we played that because not only did we talk about it on the tour, but it was also in a Christmas special that was back in the 70s. So there was 2 tie-ins there. So it was Pablo Cruz, Worlds Away. We have a winner this month. It is Jim Collins, and he'll be winning one of our Vacation Kingdom posters that we've put together. And we have another one for this month's prize as well, if you know the answer to this Audio Rewind. All right, so if you know the answer to this month's Audio Rewind, send your guesses to contest@retrowdw.com. All entries must be received by February 12th, 2019. And how you picked out this month's Audio Rewind, well, put me on the spot because I made it too hard last month. So, I appreciate you digging through your audio archives to add this one in.
Oh, not a problem. I think people will. Well, hopefully they'll know this one.
Good.
We'll see.
Excellent.
Time will tell.
There we go. All right. Well, it is time to turn it back over to Hal as we get into our main topic. As we mentioned, we're going to talk about Snow White's Scary Adventure. It was a dark ride in Fantasyland. If you walked through the castle and came right through it, it would be on your right-hand side after you passed the Mad Hatter's shop and came around the corner. My personal recollection from it, guys, was it was 1981. I was young, and I did not want to go in because of one thing: the word "scary." And I'm
really,
yeah. I remember my mom saying, "Oh no, the only thing scary is the witch comes up and asks you for the about the apple and stuff." So yeah, that's my only recollection. I think I did not ride it until maybe 5 years later in 1986, where I was good with it. So
older. Okay, well that's fine.
So
Brian and JT, did you guys ever ride it in any of its forms?
I did times. Before it closed, but I don't have any young memories of it. Like, it's almost like we didn't. I feel like, was the line always long in the 80s and 90s?
The line was always long at everything in the 80s and 90s.
So it was like no fast pass and like no, we might have. I'll have to ask my parents. I don't remember it though. It didn't stick out.
I enjoyed it a great deal. And anytime someone brings the ride up, I always say, it's the Quick and Queen, the Wicked Queen, which was my favorite audio snippet in it.
Cool. Well, good. So we're on some even footing this because everybody seems to mostly know it. So all right. So I'm going to do something a little bit different this time. So most of the episodes, I do these incredibly deep dives and do all this research, and as it turns out, there are a couple of people online that have done actually super deep analysis of this ride. So rather than be tainted by that stuff and just regurgitate what somebody else said, I didn't look at any of that stuff at all. I have some photos of the ride in front of me. I have some basic dates and numbers, and we're just going to go just kind of wing this and talk about impressions of it and some of the facts and things. But I welcome you. I'll put these in the show notes. Passport to Dreams Old and New has a really extensive article about it. Of course, Mike Lee's Widen Your World has a really nice in-depth article on it as well. And I saw a whole site devoted to it today.
Cool.
So
this is like it's Freeform Friday.
a little bit. I mean, there's certainly some things to talk about, but yeah. So some of the things that I think I want to sort of frame this up against. There's this, and I don't know if this is it's fun to kind of put it in this way, but like I see people constantly talk about, this ride is just like so psychedelic and scary and weird, and it's like affected whole people's childhoods, and I just don't know. I just think maybe that's a little too much. Not that not that it wasn't scary, because I mean, I guess it could be scary, but I mean, I can recall riding this ride. I mean, the first time I rode this was probably 1972. And, you know, I rode it every year, and then multiple times a year later as time went on. I remember as a child being terrified of the Haunted Mansion to the point where I would just like grab the back of my dad's shirt and like not let go, and I would close my eyes to the entire graveyard and not look at anything. But I just rode Snow White over and over again. So I'm not sure it's as scary as everyone has made it out to be, but I mean, it certainly was strange and interesting, kind of in the same way that Mr. Toad was strange and interesting.
Yeah, I was going to reference that. It does have the same undertones to it, and some, you know, maniacal laughs and sounds and things that certainly give it a tone. I mean, as I mentioned personally, you know, in 1981, I was 7 years old, didn't want to go on it. I did go on the Haunted Mansion then, and I felt that one was actually safer. I don't know why, you know, and I remember clearly the word "scary" in the title, as I mentioned.
Right.
Being
That's funny.
why I was pulled away from it. You know, as far as people being scarred for life, I mean, nothing popped out at you and went to grab you, but it was, like I said, it did have a very dark undertone for a good portion of the ride.
And that's the thing of it. So what I think really where all of this came from is, you know, so this originated at Disneyland. There was a version that was done by Ken Anderson. And when they looked at doing attractions for Disneyland, they kind of allegedly went and did a bunch of research about dark rides that existed sort of in places like Coney Island, and, you know, they called these things, I guess at the turn of the century, pretzel rides or ghost trains. So it was basically the same thing. It was like a single bus bar, single rail, electrified, and you'd get into a little car and you'd go around. Brian and I got to experience some of these types of rides together at Knoebels. There's a weird like Pennsylvania mine train and a ghost house. As a kid, we had a place in Canada by us called Crystal Beach, and they had a Laugh in the Dark there, and that's a really famous example, is the Laugh in the Dark. I think there were several of those in California and in some of the places in New York and stuff. And it was just, you know, that kind of a dark ride was the old traditional dark ride where you got in a car and like there'd be strings hanging down from the ceiling, or like skeletons would, you know, basically things would be in the dark and then they would light a light on it, like an incandescent light would turn on, and then you'd see like a skeleton face or something. It would make a noise, and it was to kind of, you know, to jostle you a little bit, but really it was fun more than anything. And it was probably based on that same kind of idea as the tunnel of love, to get like couples to actually get close to each other. And because the propriety of the day is that you would never, you know, have physical contact when you were out on a date. Right. So this would kind of force you.
I was going to mention what the bus bar stuff is too, if people are wondering what that is. That's the electricity line that ran down the center of the track. And if you've ever been to mall, you know, a lot of people have been to malls, you see those choo-choo trains going around the mall. Look carefully at them. That center line is the bus bar that carries the electricity. So
yeah,
similar to the monorail, only down there in the center.
So did you mention this was opening day, right?
Yeah, this was an opening day
closed
attraction.
What year?
Well, so we'll go through this because it actually went through some iterations during the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it actually opened in 1971 under the name Snow White's Adventures. And then in 1975, they added the name Scary. They added Scary to it.
See, so I would have been fine if I was older. I would have been fine.
Do you think they did that because of complaints or something, or?
That's what everybody says. I mean, that's kind of like the prevailing thought, is that it, you know, I guess people assumed that because it was a Snow White ride that you'd see princesses and it'd be happy and it wouldn't be scary. And like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride has wild in it. So it's kind of telegraphing what that does. You know, Peter Pan's Flight just had flight, but it was, you know, that was a nice sort of safe-ish ride, even though. But I mean, at the time, the guidebooks had a 2 or 3 line description of what the ride was. And the word scary was in the description. So if you actually read the description in your GAF guidebook, Like it was right there. So it shouldn't have been a surprise, but I don't know, maybe it was. So then in 1989, they actually took Scary off of it and changed it back to Snow White's Adventures.
Oh, they went back.
For whatever reason.
Huh.
And then it closed in 1994 and had a very extensive rehab. They added new scenes, took out a lot of the, weird, scary stuff. Opened it up as Snow White's Adventures. And then in 1998, they added the word scary back to the name again. And it stayed Scary until it closed in 2012.
That's so odd.
It's weird how this name thing went back and
if
forth.
we're honest, this wasn't like a get people in the door type attraction. This was like, to me, like what ticket was this? Like a B or
this
a
was
C?
a C ticket.
So yeah, you're like, it's not like you're got like a full on E ticket. That demands this much change, but that's weird.
Yeah, it was a classic attraction, and we can talk about why the changes, happened at some point. But yeah, it was. It was to me, it was like it was a dark ride. So if you go into it thinking like, okay, so like I said, this goes back to Ken Anderson and the group that was working on the Fantasyland for Disneyland. They went out and thought like, okay, we're making these little rides. It's like, it's going to be a dark ride, kind of like these dark rides at Coney Island. And what can we do, to follow that pattern? Because they were inventing the theme park industry in 1955. So I think they just went back and looked at what worked in the context of a dark ride and then adapted that to the IP of Snow White. So it was Ken Anderson who had said, like, the idea was that you were supposed to be Snow White, which is why you never saw her in the ride. You yourself were supposed to be that character. I don't know how, if you really analyze the Florida version, it can't possibly be true. It's more of a riff on the Snow White story, and we can talk about that. But definitely he was I think they were coming from this more sort of cinematic place where, as the rider, you were kind of like a motion picture camera and you were experiencing things inside of the environment of the film rather than sitting back and watching the story unfold behind you. And a lot of the advancements that we see later on with the Haunted Mansion, with the, sort of that shell to limit where you can see, is that same idea of trying to take the format of cinema where you have a controlled viewing space and bring that into like a 3-dimensional ride situation. So that was very heady and verbal, but the point is that I don't know if you're supposed to be Snow White, but you're certainly supposed to be experiencing the emotions and some of the fear that she would have experienced in that film. And we tend to think of Snow White as being like, oh, it's a princess film, but like there's some scary stuff in that movie.
Oh yeah.
I mean, for heaven's sakes, the Wicked Queen tells the huntsman to cut her heart out and put it in a box and bring it back to her to prove that she is dead. I mean, this is not like happy stuff for your 3 and 4-year-old. This is some dark stuff.
Well, and that's the nature of pretty much all fairy tales until the modern era. I mean, fairy tales throughout history, everything they read to kids and taught kids was horrifying.
Yeah, it was not. And then, the sequence where Snow White's running through the forest and she sees the trees and sort of like she's scared. So then she's hallucinating that like the trees are ominous. That's reproduced in the ride directly. So yeah, I think really the thing is they were trying to do is either they're putting you in the place of Snow White, but they're certainly trying to make you feel the things that she felt in the movie.
Yeah.
But again, in this sort of like funhouse, dark ride sort of environment. So it was never like a strict book report version of the ride.
Right. So we spoke of Birnbaum. I grabbed this too because I wanted to read his description of it in 1986 here. So it says, though basically a ride for kids, Snow White's Scary Adventure features 2 skeletons and plenty of spooky darkness. Also the Wicked Witch, evil, long-nosed, and practically toothless, appears more than once with such suddenness and menace that some youngsters end up really frightened. So here's, that's Birnbaum's description of it, kind of giving a warning there almost to parents.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say he's 100% wrong. Cause,
No.
I mean, certainly there are some kids I could, if you're frightened easily, it's like, it's probably not the ride for you. But Claude Coates worked under Ken Anderson during the Fantasyland stuff. And by the time it got time to do the Florida version, from what we understand, Claude Coates was the project show designer for Snow White's Scary Adventures. Claude Coates we're very familiar with. He's probably one of those very famous Imagineers that you actually hear his name a lot. He did Adventures Through Inner Space by himself. He did If You Had Wings. He worked with Mark Davis to do all the backgrounds, basically, in Pirates of the Caribbean. And his, Mark Davis's like Haunted Mansion, his big shows, like Claude Coates handled the atmospheric sort of the non-character stuff. He was a background painter at Disney originally. He actually did background paintings for Snow White, so it was sort of a perfect thing for him to do. He also had training in architecture, so it was very natural for him to move in this thing of building the theme spaces that the characters would exist in. So he was in charge of the project in Florida. I think they certainly looked at what was done for Disneyland, but he made some different choices about the ride layout and how it would work. And it was brilliant. It was a really great, weird, scary-ish. I think there's probably a cutoff point for where it becomes scary, because there's also some things that are just sort of hokey about it once you hit a certain age. But I think it's, either way, it was like a very enjoyable ride for anybody.
Yep.
And that's, Birnbaum says it's for kids, but really I think, as with all the attractions in the Magic Kingdom, with maybe a couple of exceptions, like really it's for families. You're trying to, it's a very broad stroke of like who the attraction is for.
Yep.
It's not like I look at the Winnie the Pooh attraction that's in Toad Space now, and that seems very designed for a young audience for the most part.
Right.
But the Fantasyland rides in the 1970s, it's like you could be, 4 or 90, and you would probably get some enjoyment out of it.
Yep. And it was a very, the design too was also a great use of space. When you look at the overhead,
oh yeah,
I mean, everything was so compacted in there, and being able to use the back side of one thing to support the front side of another, or vice versa, really, really done well. And, you got to think that space is, it's a decent sized space, and now it's, taken up by 4 or 5 princess rooms or whatever. So
yeah,
I don't think it's not huge. So they did a lot with that footprint.
Yeah. So the reason that goes back actually, Todd, to the reason that they called it pretzel rides, because they would do these like tight little turns and twists, because you didn't have a lot of space, but you could make the ride more exciting by having it, make sharp lefts and sharp rights, and that would add to the fun and excitement of it. So I'll take a little descriptive walk through the ride, I should say, or I guess a ride through the ride.
It also let them keep the scenes very small and cheap.
Yes, actually, if you look at
not very deep at all.
It's funny. I go back and I look at this, and by today's standards, this ride would be really inexpensive to make again. I mean, and there's really nothing. There's nothing that would really stop anybody who had a decent enough budget to actually build like one at the exact same, if not better quality than what was there.
Right. And it really was it harkened back to the original Plywood Land, Fantasyland rides from when Disneyland opened. At its core, at its guts, books written on the history of Disneyland, that those first iterations of dark rides there were really just painted plywood scenes.
Oh my God. And the characters looked horrible back then, if you've ever seen, the Derridite, awful. So yeah, they were, and actually it's funny you mentioned plywood, because like the outside, it is like 98% of this ride is plywood, except for a few figures, which were really nicely executed. And even the outside. So I know we talked about this in the Mr. Toad episode, but when you walked up to the load area, the whole of the outside was all plywood. There was nothing sculpted there at all. And it used that kind of really interesting 2.5D technique, where they would sort of make 3-dimensional forms and then paint like rock textures on it. So a rock was sort of like this abstract rock with paint on it. And then like there were topiary plants over on the left-hand side that sort of defined where the witch's castle were. And they were literally just balls on sticks. And then they painted leaf textures, on the balls. And that was good enough. It looked reasonably like a plant, but it wasn't like this very super detailed thing or a real plant. And part of that might have been to survive, outside in Florida, but it was economical. It looked fantastic. It was a great style.
Got the job done.
Got the job done. Exactly.
We should probably also mention too that the queue itself, the railings, just like what was in Mr. Toad's and also in Peter Pan, we're so used to these railings now being themed, like wood or tied with leather at each corner. These were standard amusement park, stadium style queue railings with a chain. And I think the only two attractions that I can think of that still have this going is Peter Pan and the Grand Prix Raceway. I think are really the only two that have some of this original.
Yeah, quite possibly.
2.5-inch pipe or whatever,
right.
Inch and a quarter, or whatever. So yeah, they were. That's on the cheap as well.
But even though it was cheap, it was really lovely. So the outside, when you would walk up, straight ahead of you, there was kind of like this wraparound woods, very picturesque again, sort of made with like these sort of half-dimensional rocks, and then there would be like a part of a tree stump that was just a painted plywood flat that was attached to the ground, and like to the left of that there was like another piece of a tree that was done, and then sort of in the back, so it was almost like a multiplane camera with animation, except built three-dimensionally, or like a store display. And then in the very back was like this little this high waterfall. And there were literally like strips of plastic hanging down from the waterfall and a fan behind it. And that would blow, and that would sort of give it the effect of a waterfall. And then like a little three-dimensional, and not fully done, but again, this kind of like 2.5D sort of extruded wood dwarf's cottage. And in fact, if you go to Tokyo Disneyland, the setup outside is exactly the same as it was in Florida's version that we're talking about here. So it still exists today in Tokyo if you get a chance to go there. But it's very simple, very beautiful, and you'd see that as you were riding or as you were waiting to get online. And then as you would sit there, you would see the cars coming out of the right-hand side, and there was sort of an exit, and it said Seven Dwarfs Mine on top, and the cars would kind of bust out the door and come up in front of you, and then you would climb on. When the ride opened, the cars would hold 4 people, so there were 2 in the front and 2 in the back. So they were pretty small. You'd get on, you'd go forward. There was this sort of abstract version of Snow White's wishing well, and you would kind of go around that in a circle, and then the castle where Snow White lived originally was sort of painted on a background on the left-hand side. And they had this neat little forced perspective thing with those ball trees that I was talking about, where they would get smaller and smaller and smaller. So it looked like these stairs and these trees were kind of receding in the background that would lead you to the back of the castle. And then you would sort of swing around and then see a different angle on the dwarf's cottage. And then as you turned to go into the ride, this was one of the neatest parts, and it's definitely super creepy. There was a window above the door that you would bust through, and every so often, before you would go in, it's like the curtains would part, and the evil queen would look down out of the windows and look at you. This effect debuted in Florida. It was later picked up and taken to Disneyland, and it's actually outside of the attraction in the Disneyland version now. But it's really neat, really effective, and just the windows opening and closing with the static tiny figure of the queen behind it. So you'd go in, and the first thing that you would see is a mirror on the wall directly in front of you. So part of this is that misdirection that we're talking about that these early rides would do. And and it's literally like a painted background wall of like stone with some painted curtains in front of it, and then this mirror which has like a big painted frame, but in the middle of it was an actual mirror, and it would reflect what was on the opposite side of the room. So you would sort of get this glimpse of what you were going to see, and then you would make a quick turn, and then you would see you would see the queen standing in front of like a big mirror with her throne on the side. And what you could see into the mirror was the reflection of the evil queen. Excuse me. And then, yeah, and it just looked like she was standing in front of the mirror, and then the figure would suddenly spin around, and then it was the transformed queen. So it was basically giving you this like thing of the transformation when she turns into the old beggar woman. So she would just spin around really fast and laugh at you, and then you would bust out of the door and go into sort of a dungeon area. So, and it was literally like real skeletons, or yeah, they were like Pirates of the Caribbean style, sort of real skeletons in cells. One of them had a cup, and again, the floors and walls and stuff in this area are built out of plywood at various levels, so it's kind of like off kilter and interesting. You would go by some light up rat eyes, and then you would see a second skeleton, and one of the skeletons had like a moving jaw, and it would say like, "Go back!" So it was trying to warn you to leave.
How many attractions have like fake little eyes in them? That's a big, a lot of them do.
Those eyes originally supposedly came from Pirates of the Caribbean in California.
Oh.
They used them there, and then they also used them in Big Thunder Mountain for like bats' eyes later on. So yeah. So yes, it was a very great. I mean, it's a great little spooky little trick. So
yeah,
again, very cheap for just some lights. Super simple. So you'd go past these two skeletons, and then you would see the raven that was her pet, kind of like sitting on top of a skull amongst some like magic formula type things. So you'd be like, "Uh-oh, something's going on. Something's about to happen." And then the car would take a quick turn, and you would see the witch at the cauldron, like holding the apple with like the poison thing on it. And if that wasn't obvious enough for you, because maybe you hadn't seen the movie, like the page with the recipe for the poison apple was actually turned out to the car, and you could see like poison apple in big letters. So you knew what she was doing. And because you're supposed to be kind of Snow White, or at least feeling like Snow White, it is at this point where she makes it obvious that she's out to get you. And this is one of the things that I think people are kind of like not so happy about, or maybe this is the stuff that makes them think that that it was scary or whatever. One of the things that is kind of interesting is they actually painted, it's very dark in this area, but they actually painted the shadows of like the raven and the queen on the wall and then behind them. And so they sort of give this like enhanced lighting effect, even though they didn't have like fancy lights in there, which is kind of fascinating. Oh, and this was all done with black lights. So this was I
was gonna say, yeah, there's a lot of black light usage, in this ride.
Yeah, and then I have some photos that I took that I'm looking at now with with flash. So it's like one of the things says Black of Night. So I assume that was one of the ingredients. And I see there's another sort of like thing that has Scream of Fright written on it. So that must have been part of the formula that she needed to make her stuff. So she's got the poison apple. And then classic dark ride gag. It's like you go past a shelf some bottles and stuff on it, and like the shelf does the fake collapse down into another shelf, which does the fake collapse. So there's the thing of like, oh, this stuff is going to spill on me. And if you've ever ridden the Cat in the Hat ride at Universal, you know that they still use that gag in the kitchen for things. So that is, I guess, an old tried and true one. So you now come out of her dungeon, and you're outside, and it's nighttime, and you see this kind of like a bridge. So you're on the water, and then suddenly the queen, the witch comes like whipping out of the side in this boat, holding an apple. And I think that's the point where she's like, "Have an apple, dearie?" So she's.
I remember my mom telling me, "Oh, she swings out and says, do you want an apple?" I'm like, "No, it's scary." So, exactly, that's what she's gonna do. You don't have to take it.
I don't want an apple. It's too healthy.
So, if you guys remember when we talked to R.J. Ogren, he in his book, Together in the Dream, there's a great story in there about the apple, as that's an item that a lot of people reached out and grabbed and were successful in ripping it off. And quite a few times it was ripped off or broken, and it got to the point, I think if I remember correctly, guys, they kept trying to figure out how to glue it on better, and then it got to like the fingers breaking off and the arm breaking off, and that was pretty close, and you could easily reach out and grab it. So it's a good story, a good read. I don't have it in front of me, but certainly pick up that story and take a look at it. But Together in the Dream by R.J. Ogren.
Yeah, that's actually funny, and I guess it is close enough there that you could probably get your hands on it as you went by. So she swings out from there, and then I guess this probably must have been something that was in the film, but gosh, it's been so long since I've seen it. They had these alligators that were really supposed to be logs, but they're kind of painted like alligators too. They have teeth, and they have like red, but this is part of that hallucination of like, I'm so scared now that I'm seeing things that aren't really there. So these alligators open and close their mouths, and one of them lunges out at you. So you go past these gators, and then you go into like the scary trees. And I read online that like some of the trees would kind of like lunge at you or turn at your car. I'm not saying that they didn't do that. I'm just saying, like, with the car moving and everything, I never perceived that once in all the times that I rode it. And it's so dark in there that I just maybe never noticed that. And it could have been going on, but supposedly some of them turn, some of them would kind of like lunge out at you. And, it's that whole thing with like, the tree trunks, and they have faces, and the branches become hands. So it's supposed to be really scary. And then just past that, if you think about the Haunted Mansion, and if you think of the organ, and up on top of the organ where the pipes are, there's that thing where the skulls come out, and it's kind of on the rotating thing. So they come out into view and then go away. They had a very similar type of thing in that area. And instead of the skulls, they had these eyes that were kind of at the end of sticks with blacklight paint on it. And this is a direct lift from the Snow White film. And the eyes would kind of like rotate up to, I guess, scare you. And they were kind of, I don't know, sort of like eyes, sort of like bats. So you go past that, and then finally you would see the cottage up ahead. Snow White's cottage. You're like, oh, finally, some reprieve. But no. And this is really weird. So, the cottage looked very inviting from the outside. It looked nighttime, like there were some lights on inside. But again, I think this is the same sort of concept as where she's scared when she finds the cottage. So you go into the cottage, and it's like a little scene from the film inside. So the sink with all the dishes is on the right-hand side, and then their table with chairs and the whatnot is sort of directly in front of you. Really interesting is that there are these, I don't know if this is when was the last time you saw the movie? I haven't seen it in forever, but
a long time. Yeah.
I guess there's animals carved into sort of like the support beams and the chairs and things. So like these animals and the chairs, and like there's a teapot that have faces, and they all look like they're afraid and scared. So they have big eyes, and they're all kind of going like, oh. So you're getting into this room. You're supposedly in the safety of the dwarf's cottage, but you see these inanimate objects that seem to be alive. So I guess you're sort of continuing that weird fantasy from the outside. So we take another quick turn, and then you see these animals like looking in an open window. There's like a fawn and a raccoon and a rabbit and a little squirrel, and they also look scared. So something is going on in the dwarf's cottage. And then you make a quick right, and then you get into this room where you actually see, for the first time, like full figures of the dwarfs, and they're climbing a staircase that's on the left side of the room that you're facing. And like Doc is in front and he's holding a lantern. Dopey has a candle. He's at the bottom and he's trying to run away, but someone's holding on to him, so he can't get away, because that's funny. And then sort of up at the top of the staircase is this weird kind of like shadow demon type thing, which isn't in the movie at all. Excuse me. And I think there's some dialogue in there about them saying that there's a ghost and they're investigating it. And this kind of draws your eye away. And then as you come out of that scene, there's like a half door. Those things where like the door was in the top, and then I don't know how to describe it. It's like one of those doors that was split in the center. And the top of it is open. The bottom is closed. And as you're going by, the witch pops out to offer you an apple yet again. Like there's that damn witch out of nowhere. You come out of the door there. There's 2 vultures up in a tree. And the witch pops out from behind the tree with the apple again to like try to get you. So you're out in the woods and you've seen the vultures and the witch has menaced you again. So then as you turn, you see the 7 dwarfs mine, because I guess for some reason we need to amp things up. So the mine is another part of the film, although it doesn't really have a big sequence or purpose of the plot. It's just in there. So you see the mine, and there's a little forced perspective thing where the mine seems to be going on forever, and it's really just the parts are getting a little smaller. But again, that's a classic Funhouse gag. So that was directly lifted from Funhouses and brought into here. You take a turn again, and the damn witch shows up again, except instead of this time having an apple, she's actually up against one of the beams, and I always thought she said, "Enjoying the ride?" But apparently she might have been saying something else. Which I think it's weird that she would it's very meta that she would recognize the fact that you're on a ride.
Yeah, it's like breaking the fourth wall
but
here.
I was on a site that said she said something else entirely. But it's, to me,
it's like the graces or braces here. Is that the
I always only heard enjoying the ride, so I have not sure. But she pushes the top beam, and it does this kind of gag where that top beam then hits another beam, which pushes the second one down, and there's sort of a domino effect down the room, so where it looks like the mine is going to collapse on you. Because at this point, she just wants to kill you. You wind through this, and you come around a corner, and there's sort of like a side chamber to the mine, and then this mine cart comes around the corner and sort of stops abruptly, again in a classic Funhouse gag of like, oh, something's going to hit you. And I think Randy talked about somehow how he plussed up the minecart too here. I can't remember what the details were, but the gems were actually lit from underneath, which was kind of interesting. So it was actually like a transparent top that was painted, and it was lit from underneath it to make it look more fancier and gem-like, I guess. But also probably to give some light to it, so that way you notice the thing was coming around the corner. So you would get through that section. So you come around the corner there, and now you're inside of the main vault. And there's just like rocks and gems painted on all the walls. You see the door at the end that says vault written on it. And then on top of the door is the witch with like a stick, and she's got this. There's this huge green emerald on top, and she's like pushing the emerald down to like try to drop it on your head. And I think she says something. Well, I'm trying to remember. Is it like goodbye, dearie? And she basically drops the thing on your head. The door in there opens up, and there's kind of like these explosion cutouts and a strobe light, and the sound of like stuff crashing on you. And basically, it ends kind of like Mr. Toad, where like you've died. So she has finally managed to eliminate you.
So I've got to add in here. Hold on, Birnbaum has a great line on explaining how that last scene went. At the end, the hag dumps a rock on the passengers, and the stars you see are some of the most amazing effects. I love how he calls her the hag.
Yeah, I'm surprised he called it like one of the most amazing effects. Cause
yeah, exactly. In the ride, though, he didn't say all over.
Oh, I forgot to mention that while you're in the, and this is a little detail that I think a lot of people, in one of the scenes in the mine, there's like a painting of an open door with like powder kegs of TNT in it. So apparently that's part of the thing too. Oh, crazy. I will scan all these pictures and get them up so people can see this, because this stuff has been, is long overdue of getting out into the world. But that was it. It was, I mean, I don't know how scary it was, but like, it was definitely weird. There was not a lot of music, JT, actually, in the thing. There was a little bit of dialogue from the witch. There were some ambient sounds in some locations, but it was really a very bare bones. It was the type of thing where like your car would run over something and it would trigger the sound. So it was not very, it was not very sophisticated. So like, so you would hit, like I said, you would hit a thing and the skeletons would tell you to go back. It's like you might hit something and the witch would say something to you as she popped out to be scary, but it was not a very rich ride, like they would make today. So that takes us to the ride ran exactly like it is from 1971 until 1994, and they closed it in October of 1994. Put up construction walls, and put this big sign up on front of the wall that said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's got the newest show of all? Snow White's Adventures, opening December 1994." And they basically took a rendering of what the queue was going to look like and used it as the background for that. So really what this was the opportunity for them to do was kind of make it a little less scary. They'd gone through several iterations of the ride. When they redid Fantasyland at Disneyland in 82, they redid it. They had an opportunity to build it in 83 at Tokyo Disneyland. And then when they did Euro Disney in 1992, they took another fresh look at it and made some changes. So I think during that time period, this is when they were contemplating and closing 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, thinking about changing out Mr. Toad. So I think there was kind of this effort underway just to generally kind of refresh some of the older rides, because as Brian has talked about many times, there is this time period before something becomes a classic where it's just kind of considered old and unwanted. So this was an opportunity to, spend a little bit of money to do some upgrades to an existing ride rather than build something new. But they also did change the cars from a car with a capacity of 4 to a car of a capacity of 6. So they were able to, this was still a very popular ride. So just as they did with Toad, it's like they were trying to increase capacity, in a very small C-ticket ride to just try to get as many people on it as they could. But while they were doing that, they made some fundamental changes to the attraction. And this is probably the version that most of us remember best now, because like the transformation scene with the Queen is still really good. They did completely change the front of the attraction. So all of the stuff that we talked about, like, was all gone. There was mostly just like a big painted scene in the background. On the side where you go to enter the attraction, Snow White was actually sitting on stairs for the first time. So they had a sculpted figure of Snow White holding some birds while she's doing her cleaning. The Queen still kind of scowls at her from up in the window. You come in, you see the magic mirror on the left, and it actually looks for the first time like the magic mirror from the movie. It has the zodiac stuff around it. It's more realistic. The queen does her changing act a little bit better than it did before. Much fancier. You go into a room with the skeleton. One of the skeletons is still there, but the whole setup of her in front of the cauldron is redone. And the painting overall and the detail is much, I don't know. It's just more detailed. Where the old paintings are more abstract, it's like, I guess it's just more in style of what they would do in the 1990s, and maybe a little bit more like the movie rather than just going off and doing their own thing. But the queen still has the poison apple. The section that you see the huntsman, they're trying to introduce more of the Snow White story in it. So there's a point where you see like a painted picture of the huntsman, and there's some audio telling you, to run away. I'm just flipping through some of the photos here. Oh, so what you were thinking of before with the band, with them in there playing the music. So when you get to the dwarf's cottage now, they actually brought the figures from Mickey Mouse Revue from Tokyo and installed them in the Snow White ride here. So that's where those came from. So the figures of the dwarfs playing music, and with Dopey up on the shoulders of one of the other dwarfs. That was actually Mickey Mouse Revue stuff that they brought back.
That's so cool.
So it is kind of neat because that other attraction then sort of got put into this attraction. It's weird. They left the stair. So that turnaround is where the table and the wash basin used to be. You come around the corner, and now there's not really anything on the stairs. So it was weird because they left the stairs there, but there really wasn't anything to look at in that spot. And then down at the end of that room where the witch would pop out, there were then static figures of Snow White receiving the apple from the witch. And then when you came out of that room, you still had the vultures there, but and there was still a witch there, but the background was painted much more realistically. It was a little bit more bright. The trees were still painted flats, but it looked much more cinematic. And then when you got to instead of going to the vault, it was actually the witch up on a rocky precipice with a large rock, which is how it worked in the film. And I think that's what they did in Disneyland too. So you actually see the witch trying to knock the rock down on you, and she gets struck by lightning. And there's a little lighting effect behind her where you can see the lightning strike. And then for the first time, they added another scene. So the reason that the queue kind of changed is they took the space where the waterfall and the cottage were and extended the ride into that area. And they made a little tableau of the prince kissing Snow White on the little death thing. I don't know what you call that. I'm sure there's a nicer word than that.
The coroner's table?
The glass. Yeah, the glass.
The beer. The beer.
I don't know.
It a beer?
The glass. The glass is off the coffin, but she's sitting up on the thing. So you see the love's first kiss scene.
It is a beer.
And then there
BIER, yes.
A beer. Yeah. All right, let's have a beer.
Good job.
That's why I'm here.
Here for the beer.
I'm here, folks.
And then when you come off from that scene, there were two dwarfs, dimensional, and I think Foxy Hoops said they reminded her more of things that were used for displays in stores than sculpted figures used for other things. They're kind of in this wooded glen. They're waving to a painting of Prince Charming and Snow White on a rocky road that's kind of heading off to her castle. And there was a Dopey, a figural Dopey, up on a thing saying goodbye to you, and that was the end. So it turned into kind of a nicer, gentler, kinder version of the Snow White ride. And that existed until 2012 because Disney had an idea that they were going to expand New Fantasyland. It actually was originally supposed to still be there. They came up with the idea to do New Fantasyland, They knew they were going to do the Little Mermaid ride. They knew, they were going to do Be Our Guest. But instead of the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train ride, they had planned to do meet and greets with like little cottages. So each of the princesses would have their own little cottage, and like Tinkerbell and her fairy friends would have like a tree where you would go and meet them. And there's early renderings where you can actually see all of that. And then Universal opened up a little thing down the street called Harry Potter, and Disney freaked out because someone was actually spending money to make really great, nice environments. And I think there was apparently a general feeling in someone in management that there was too much emphasis on girls with all the meet and greets that were being built, and they were spending a tremendous amount of money and really not getting, as much mix as they needed to. And then a rather hasty decision was made to put a Seven Dwarfs Mine Train roller coaster in the space where all those meet and greets were going to be. They still wanted to do the meet and greets, and sort of then a swap was made. So they decided, since we're going to build a Seven Dwarfs themed roller coaster, we will get rid of the old Snow White ride. And that was the trade. So the princesses are where the Snow White ride is, and now we have a Snow White themed roller coaster. As you said, Todd, there are a couple figures from the Snow White ride that actually made it over to the roller coaster. Right, yeah. So the two vultures that were inside are now outside as part of the roller coaster. And then at the end, when you see Snow White's cottage and the dwarfs are inside playing music, like those are figures that are reused from the ride as well. So a little piece of it lives on in the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train ride now.
And I'm just doing a comparison here on Google Maps of actual ride buildings, approximate square footage. And it's interesting that, Mr. Toad was obviously a bit bigger. These are just rough, but looking at about 18,000 square feet. So Peter Pan and Snow White were both about the same at about 13,000 square feet. So that's not a lot of spaces we were talking about either.
I mean, the ride was under 2 minutes. Start to finish. It was a very quick ride.
Comparison,
yeah.
Just to give you an idea, Small World, 44,000 square feet. So that is a big building. Yeah, it's a big show building. Just gives you kind of a sense of the scale that we're talking about here.
A couple of comments on the closing. First, Hal mentioned at the outset that there are some deep dives that we're going to put links to in the show notes. There is also a lot of photography and videography that captured the ride in its final state. And part of the reason for that is that it's the first classic attraction that was scheduled to close, like publicly everybody knew it was going to close, after the advent of like HD camcorders and stuff that people own that worked well in low light situations. And I think in the wake of Mr. Toad and some of the stuff that closed earlier in the 2000s, that there was more of a conscientious effort on the part of this community. In fact, I'd almost go so far as to say that the community, I don't want to say didn't exist at the time of Mr. Toad, but didn't have a sense of purpose like it does now. Does that not sound like, I don't want to sound too pretentious.
I'd say that's true. There was, at the time when Toad closed, there were literally a handful of people that were real hardcore enthusiasts of.
Well, I also think that there was a mistaken belief amongst a lot of the fans, like, oh, well, Disney just takes like literally everything in the building and puts it in a warehouse somewhere for storage. And I think over the course of the 2000s, seeing like bits of Mr. Toad at Theme Park Connection and on eBay, and so like people started to suddenly realize that only like really certain pieces are saved and stored, and the rest of it is either sold off or destroyed.
These attractions are not coming back, folks. I hate to tell you.
Right. So I think that's probably part of that. But the one story that bears mentioning as we talk about the closing, because it was widely covered at the time, is the story of Ben Miles. No relation, And as far as I know, no relation to our friend Reese Miles in Florida either. But Ben Miles is an autistic child who, a very short version of the long story, because his father wrote an entire book about this youngster's experience. But he was born autistic, didn't talk, and didn't really show joy. But at 9 years old, his family his parents brought him to Disney World, and from the time he entered the park, he was like a different kid. And the first ride that he ever went on was Snow White, and he developed such an attachment to it. Eventually, they moved to Orlando from the West Coast where they lived, and in order to bring him to the park more often. And at the time that Snow White was scheduled to close, it was his favorite ride. He had ridden it somewhere near 3,500 times, which is a lot of time, but thank God it's not Small World, because this was only a 2-minute ride. So it's not nearly as much of a commitment as maybe that one would have been. But Disney cast members had gotten to know him and his family because of his many rides, and he was there on the last day. They allowed him actually a couple of things. When he had his 2000th ride, they arranged for him to meet Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He got a kiss from Snow White. But approaching the last night, he was under 3,500 rides. So they allowed him to be the last rider and allowed him to go through several times so that he could hit 3,500 total times that he rode it. And they chronicled it, and they even let him go through by himself. And there's a story in there about his father asking the cast member, is there like a security guard watching on the camera monitors the whole way? And she said, nope, there's no cameras in there at all, just intrusion mats all over the place. But don't worry, the bar will keep him in place. He won't get out of his car. So he got to ride through it a bunch of times on the last night, and they let him have the last ride. And he continues to visit the parks, but nobody has asked him what he thinks of Mine Train.
Nice story.
It is. And there is a book out. I want to
right.
actually see if I can pull it up so that it is called 3,500, an autistic boy's 10-year romance with Snow White. And we'll post a link to that on the show notes to Amazon, where you can pick up a copy. It's $10.
Well, Brian, Hal, and JT, thank you very much for the research and comments on this month. Let's do a little bit of plugging of our own here for how you came up with a new shirt out of the blue. Well, we kind of discussed it, and then you surprised us all of a sudden.
That's right. Bam.
Hey.
Bam. So
Jingle bell, jingle bam.
You want to tell the listeners a little bit about what you came up with?
So we started, it's been a little while since we've done these, but I really liked, when we were doing the Nabby Grabber and some of our sort of almost Main Street-esque like window designs. We did the Blair's Goat Farm based on your idea, which was fantastic. The Blair's Five-Legged Goat Farm, it's like that. It was such a nice, so great. Let's do another one of those. And I was thinking about our episode with about River Country and Fred Yoger, who had done all the rocks for that and Big Thunder Mountain. So we have a Fred Yoger's Rockworks t-shirt now available, and also its bags and all kinds of other stuff since 1953, because that's when he was hired by Walt to start working on Disneyland. And I couldn't resist going for the Bad Jungle Cruise pun, and it says on the bottom of it.
And if you recall, we interviewed Jim Sarno a few months back, and he told us how Fred Yerger and Harriet Burns used to exchange dirty birthday cards. So,
well, thanks, Hal. And as everybody can check out if you head over to retrodwdw.com/support us, it will take you right over to our page where you can purchase the designs on t-shirts, cell phone covers, tapestries, pillows, stickers, you name it. And I also wanted to give everybody a heads up on some new films, as well as lots of new photos and slides. As you're listening to this, we recently did quite a big upgrade actually in the back end of the web server, so it should be faster now. So we had a brief hiatus there of uploading photos and getting them ready as we did this upgrade. But the new gallery software is ready to go. We're utilizing it. We've got quite a number of slides from Brian that he's been scanning. A new section called Found Photos, which are ones that we stumble across or purchase on eBay. We also have a number of different albums that some of you as listeners have submitted to us to share with you. So we'll get those all up there. And there's some fantastic, wonderful slides coming from, Brian, I'm thinking of one that you shared with us yesterday. Just kind of looked like an internal person taking some pictures around of, insides of buildings that you just never see. They're very, very rare photos.
We like to give a backstory to these slide sets sometimes when we come across them and they're abnormal. So Todd and I, looking at this one, have decided that this was some kind of either food industry professional or Disney employee or a competitor doing some kind of food service research.
Reconnaissance mission.
all of the photos are of menu boards and checkout stands and buffeteria lines, and we got our first real good look at what one of those buffeterias looked like back in the 70s and 80s with you literally walked along and said, I'll take one of those and one of those. And at the end of the line was a cash register. And she looked at what you had on your plate and rung you up, and then you went and sat down. That was in the Crystal Palace, we figured out. So we're still identifying a few of the photos, but that article and set of photos will come out shortly after this podcast. So stay tuned.
Yeah, and I want to reiterate to everyone, all this stuff online, it's searchable. So if you're looking for a photo of something, like every now and then I'll get a request from like, hey, do you have a photo of this thing? And I immediately just go to the site and go into the search fields and search and see if there's something in our library. So use it. It's a resource. Those photos are up there not just to look at, but like search them, find them. We have all sorts of gems in there. Put in keywords. We're constantly going in and trying to update that stuff and add more keywords and make sure, some of the captions are wrong because we're going through thousands of photos here.
And this quarter, we're going to have one of our volunteers starting on the process of going through, double checking them, re-tagging them, reassigning some of the ones that might be misfiled or could be filed better. That's one of the Historical Society projects that's going to be done first. Only 11,000 images to go through. So it's to be done in no time at all.
Yeah, it's exactly. So it'll only take a couple days. And it's quite a daunting task to go through all those. And even just the incoming folder alone, these are random photos that we come across. That's in the neighborhood of over 1,000 photos that just have to be looked at and decided where they should live. So definitely a lot of work to do. But as Hal pointed out, just click on the little search icon, the little magnifying glass, and go into the search galleries. And it's a great way to pick up that stuff. And as we said, we'll expand those tags and everything out so that it's even more searchable in the future. So, and again, thank you to everybody for all their continued support on the Historical Society, too. The maps have been great. We've got a high number of you guys have sent in your donations. We've sent out all the maps that as your gift, so keep those coming. And don't forget, we have that map contest that will draw to a close towards the end of February here. So you can go right to our website and check out the map contest link that's on the homepage. Alrighty, and with that, guys, I think it's about time we wrapped it up. Next month, we haven't decided the topic yet, but we'll figure out a good place to go. Any hints or any ideas where you guys want to go?
We've got a couple suggestions from folks. One guy wants to hear about the Mickey Mouse Review, which is another one of those attractions that a lot of people have not experienced because it went bye-bye before a lot of our listeners were born.
I think Hal might be the only one of us who has experienced it.
Geez, that's scary. But yes, I did. I did actually see it at least a couple of times.
You are a wee little mite, but
yeah.
So that's coming soon, and we've talked about heading back to MGM Studios, which is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, and revisiting some of the attractions that were in MGM's past. And we got a couple of terrific sets of slides from 1992 and 1993 that I just scanned today from the Disney MGM studios. So lots of good stuff coming. I need to send out a thank you to one of our listeners in South Florida, Andrew Toffoli. Andrew is a children's illustrator book author, and he has created a series of books based on historical figures portrayed as animals. So he contacted me a few months ago, said, I want to send you a copy that should be near and dear to a Philadelphian's heart. And he sent me the children's book autographed of Benjamin Franklin, who is a Bengalese tiger.
Okay.
Who is Benjamin Franklin. And he's got like...
Oh, man.
Yes, he's got like Tom Moose Jefferson, who's a moose, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm actually going to be in South Florida in a couple of weeks, taking a roundabout route before I rendezvous with Hal for our traditional Super Bowl weekend meetup, where neither one of us watches the football game. But I'm actually going to reach out to Andrew and see if we can get together for a quick say hey, because it's a really cool thing. So we'll put a link to his website and his books on the thing too. He's been writing to us since our very first episode. I remember getting emails from him our first year. So it's nice to have talented fans out there.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. All right, with that, guys, thank you for your time as always. Thank you to all of our listeners. If you can, give us a shout out or a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to us. We thank you very much, and we'll be back next month. And with that, Brian, take us out.
Follow the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society on Twitter and Instagram at LBV History and on the web at lbvhistory.org. Follow Todd McCartney and Retro WDW on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Retro WDW. For all things Retro Disney World, including exclusive merchandise, visit us on the web at retrowdw.com. On Twitter, follow our web designer, Jason Bartell of Deepwater Studios, at JasonDWS. Our announcer, Andre Gardner, at Andre Gardner. And follow our hosts, Hal Bowers, on Twitter and Instagram, at GoAwayGreen, and on the web at kingdomofmemories.com. For JT Kujar on Twitter, at LS1JT, on YouTube at Rubber City Motoring, and on the web at rubbercitymotoring.com. And you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, at Brian P. Miles. Retro Disney World is the monthly podcast of the Lake Buena Vista Historical Society, a nonprofit, nonpartisan, tax-exempt 501c3 organization, and is not affiliated in any way with the Walt Disney Corporation or any of its subsidiary or affiliated entities. Bye.